First thing I'll do is just welcome you all for coming. Thanks for coming. It's going to be a little bit of an experiment, but hopefully we'll get some interesting information out of this. I've titled today's talk, The Fundamentals of Healing. And the reason for that is because I want to talk about the basic points that theoretically and practically help us to learn how to heal within ourselves. Okay, so that's the important thing. So I'm just going to bring up a few little concepts here. The purpose of our little meetings is to deepen our understanding and awareness of ourselves, and we're going to do that through a discussion of a wide variety of topics. So the idea with this is to train our mind and our consciousness to practically, so this is not just theoretical, I'm going to focus on the practical parts, the actual paying attention, and noticing the relationships between health and disease within ourselves, okay? The reason this is important because if we can tune into ourselves, that'll tell us what's true or what's not true. If you know what's healthy in yourself, then when you're interacting with people in the world, you can see if what they say resonates with what's true in yourself. And if you know what's in trouble in ourselves, our disease or things that aren't healthy, we can also see ourselves what's adding to that disease or what's not healthy. So it gives us a way to judge or measure what's good for us and what's not good for us. So, and then the final part of what we're going to do each week is, for those who want to keep going, is practice a variety of self-healing exercises. I use a lot of visualizations, and that helps to unify and balance ourselves and sort of balance any imbalanced relationships that we have within ourselves or within ourselves and relationships to the world around us or with other people. So there's a few little tips that I sort of threw together here. One is that I'm not interested here in arguing belief systems. You're entitled to any belief system that you want. So we're not trying to change anyone's belief system. We're not trying to make you do anything that you don't want to do. All we're going to do is present information and get you to consider things from perhaps different perspectives in order to optimize health outcomes. So we want to unify, not separate and divide. So we don't want to argue, we just want to present and share information. We've only got a short time, so we need to be aware of that. So just be mindful and respectful of one another. If you want to ask any questions, maybe just type that in the chat box and we'll try and get to it if we've got time. Or otherwise, if we have whatever spare time we have after the little presentation, you can probably ask me questions there. Just keep in mind that a lot of the information that I've got here, I've already got developed in my website. So a lot of the information is just sort of summarizing stuff I've already produced. I've got online workshops and I've got lots of articles and lots of information on my website that you can look at to get more detailed information. So, and the other thing is it'll come around again. So don't try and make it all happen. Just don't try and grasp everything at once if it's a bit different or a bit new, because it will come around. So the other thing is be open-minded. So take it in, think about the concepts that I'm going to share. Notice if they provoke what I call a reaction or a response. So I'll talk a little bit more about what a reaction is versus what a response is, but very briefly, the personality or the ego reacts, whereas the soul or the real self or the healthy self always responds and makes the most of any situation. But I'm going to go over that. So make your own mind up if the material's helpful or healthy or not. Keep whatever ideas we talk about on the shelf of consciousness. I talk about this little shelf that you have at the back of the mind, that you can store everything that you hear in the world that anyone says to you. Now, you're not supposed to believe that information blindly. You put it on the shelf and only take it off if it resonates with what's going on in your life in the moment, in the now. That means that if something is not correct, if it's an error or part in error, you never take it off the shelf. If it's a truth and something which works, then you can take it off the shelf anytime you want, whenever it makes sense in your life. So we're going to go over important information. We're going to slightly add different perspectives. So many of you will already know a lot of this information, so you're all going to come probably from different perspectives. But we're just going to keep adding and changing the perspectives slightly because we want to start looking at things in lots of different dimensions, not just one side like of a dice. We want to look at things from lots of different perspectives in order to see things from the whole united perspective. It's a bit like if you look at a dice, you can see the dice from 6 directions outside in, and eventually you come to this realization that you're inside the dice and you can see all perspectives at once. So that's a really nice place to be because you can see lots of different viewpoints and how they all interrelate without having to choose one or the other, for example, and argue the points. So we're going to go over it. We'll add depth. Just keep in mind we can't force understanding. We can't make ourselves understand something, but we can allow it to unfold naturally. So if you sort of just relax, you don't have to cram it all in now. Enjoy the journey, take the information in, see what feels right, see what doesn't, think about it, and then rather than just react to it and argue with it or whatever it is, just let it sit for a while and see if it resonates over time. So in one sense, we're not teaching anything new, but we're remembering and we're being who we already are, and perhaps getting some practice in recognizing the health in ourselves and learning to stay in that natural state. As I said, we've got lots of resources on my website. They're all there to use. I've done lots of work, and it's just a matter of people looking at them and giving some feedback on them and seeing if they like it. But there's plenty of information to help you learn how to heal there. There's books and courses and articles and all sorts of things. So the topic for today is fundamentals of healing. I just wanted to throw this picture up because with all that's going on in the world today, there's a lot of fear and worry around health, and with the virus and all the other potentially controversial subjects that are going on around the world. I'm just going to talk about what I know for me and what I can help with based on my experience in about 27 or 6 or 7 years as an osteopath and a healer. And one thing I do know, if you divide health up into two different categories, so the first one is internal. So internal health means that our life energies, the energies within ourselves, interacts with the forces of the spirit, the soul, the mind, the emotions, energies, and body. And it means all of those elements of ourself are functioning as one unit. Now, we'll talk about health in a sec, but one basic definition of health is if it's healthy, it's easy, it functions, it's balanced, because there's a reason we use that terminology. And if we're in sync with our inner health, that means that we're going to make healthy life choices based on what feels right and in harmony with this inner health. The only trouble is, in the world as we know it, we're not really taught when we're little, young, how to tune into our inner health. We just get brought up focusing on the external world. So if we were taught how to tap into that inner health, that stuff that we sort of intuitively know is right, we'd have a way to tell what is actually healthy for us and what is not. So if you, we'll get to the diagram in a sec, but if you look on the other side of the picture, there's external things that we can do to help health. Now, I've sort of done a brainstorm and thought, well, there's two things we can do. There's ways and means that we can use to support our health. So this might be things like the foods we eat. We can select the right foods to help. We can make sure that we have healthy interactions with other people. We communicate in a loving, supporting, kind way. We can make sure that we're in harmony with the environment. We can add in some exercise. We can make sure we're using the right equipment. We can learn things, external knowledge around health and healthcare and correct technique in sport, and all those things are things that help to support our health. And then there's other things we can do which you might say help to prevent exposure to disease, and harmful substances in environments or people. So we all know if we're in an environment with a lot of fear and control and stress, people around us are stressed, then there's a tendency for us to feel that stress and take it on board. So this is where things like, this is where the government's coming from and people out there are all coming from in the present crisis in the world. But, you know, we can look at hygiene practices, safe practices, for example. You could look at vaccines if they're safe and actually work as they're intended, and there's a lot of controversy around that. It's a very sensitive subject. But I will remind you, and this is what I've been trying to write about recently, that even if they work, they protect us against one strain of, like the flu, for example, or disease. But the trouble is, nature tends to mutate and tends to change, and if we're still unhealthy in ourselves, we're still going to attract that disease in some other form. So it's almost like a fear-based system that may or may not actually help, and it doesn't actually make us healthy. They're just preventative measures. If you think about it logically, they don't make us healthy. What makes us healthy is everything on the left side, the internal, and the supporting things we do in terms of food, diet, lifestyle, environment, and so on. So I hope that makes some sense. So I'll move that again. So we get to this diagram on the left here. This is just a very simplified picture of an introduction to our multidimensional self, and we'll talk about that another time. But I put a little sun at the top here representing our health, which you could call your higher self. Some people call it the soul. Some people call it the Christ self, but we're just going to call it health. So it's a very neutral term. These three little circles here, discs, represent our mind, our emotions, and our body. So if you look at the line in the middle, that's our healthy life energies. Now, if we're aligned mentally, emotionally, and physically, health will flow unimpeded and find expression and manifestation in the world in which we live. So I call this the bucket of the personality. So this little picture here with the little problem inside the health, this could represent a faulty belief system or a faulty interpretation or something that we are attaching ourselves to that creates disease inside our own system. So you can see from this picture that if we operate from that dis-ease, I'll call it dis-ease, and we project that out onto other people, if other people then take on that disease, that means they're not owning their own health and their own power. They're starting to become, it's like spreading the disease, not spreading the health. So we want to spread health, not disease, right? You don't want to spread fear, because fear just lowers your immune system and makes you more susceptible to the very thing that you're afraid of. We want to find what's healthy. We want to overflow health. So in this diagram, if you imagine this is your healthy life energy, if you are aware of this, let's say you're aware, you look inside yourself and you find that most of your mind is very clear and there's a little part that's a bit stuck. If you are aware of that, this little line here represents that if you're not aware of it, part of your life energy is diverted to holding on to that problem. So in other words, we are keeping it alive by our belief in it, and we're feeding it like a drug addict, shooting ourselves up with energy to keep that alive. At the same time, the parts of our system that are healthy will be directing a lot of our energy to our healthy system. Now, what happens is, because they stay separate, this energy here is fighting the energy here, so we create conflict in ourselves. And so long as we're attached to that issue or believing in it and giving it energy, we're actually, it's like, you know, it's like the government sending arms to another country, providing them with the very weapons that they're using to fight the country that gave it to them. So it's a little bit like that. The forces are fighting amongst themselves, but they're all supplied by the same energy. So when we're healing, what we really want to do is we want to notice in ourselves where we're holding on to dis-ease. We want to come back to a healthy place. We want to choose to express more health as we let it flow. Because we're not feeding the problem anymore, we're not giving it any energy, it's going to run out of energy. Now that energy that's holding the problem has been building up for sometimes a whole lifetime or even many lifetimes, if you want to go into that. But there's a lot of momentum sometimes behind our diseased state. And when you stop feeding it, the energy that's already there, it's like it's got a storehouse of energy. And if you don't feed it, it's going to start to starve. It's going to start to run out of energy eventually. So when you're aware of the problem, being aware of the problem isn't feeding it, it's noticing it, you're unplugging your healthy energies from it, you're plugging back into health, and you're letting it flow back in and flowing through and transmuting that energy to clear it, and therefore you're flushing muck out of the bucket of the personality, and you're becoming more, manifesting more health. Now, as you manifest more health, because the body, the immune system, will be lifted because it's healthier. You have no conflict between, you could say that this healthy life energy is our true self and the conflict is our not self. And the immune system in the body is designed to recognize the difference between the real self and the not self. So if you're confused about who you are inwardly, your immune system's also going to be confused about who you are outwardly. And you're going to possibly take in harmful substances from foods and everywhere else and absorb them into your body and actually create the disease state, because disease attracts disease. Whereas if you are healthy and you're flowing with health, then your system knows what to absorb. So even if you eat bad food, like you'll notice that some people, for example, eat horrible food and they're still healthy, and other people do all the right things with food and they're still unhealthy. It's because there's internal patterns going on in the body here that are attracting that from the food. So if you're healthy, your system goes, all right, I've just eaten a bar of chocolate. There's 3% health in that bar of chocolate and 97% is unhealthy food. My bowel and my system is going to absorb the 3% that's health and pass the rest, because it knows the difference. So you could think of it like that. So healthy mind and healthy emotions will attract healthy mental food, mental emotional food, and as a consequence, the body learns to absorb healthy things from the external environment physically. So the external world is a projection. So yes, by all means do supportive things to help health, by all means prevent exposure, but those things augment or help or support you. They don't actually make you healthy. And if you're a person in sync with health, you will make healthy life choices. You will want to exercise, you will want to eat better, you will want to treat other people with love and respect. So it's sort of common sense. So if you think of it, this diagram, we sort of need both an inner predisposition and an outer exposure in order to be susceptible to a disease. So, for example, if we are inwardly unhealthy and then we're exposed to a bacteria or a virus or something like that, because there's a match, it's like an energetic match, then we're more likely to catch that thing that we don't want to get. So that's why I said, yeah, this sort of stuff is preventative only. But the best prevention, if you want to improve your inner health, you lift your immunity and you get to the point where you are less likely or unlikely to catch the disease, even when you're exposed to it, or at the very minimal, when you are exposed to it, you might get a very minor bout of it. It doesn't have much effect. And that's sort of what's happening with this coronavirus at the moment. A lot of people seem to be getting quite sick. It hits some people extremely hard, but at other people, they don't get much symptoms. And I would suggest that the reason for that is that the people that are affected the most have stuff going on inside their own systems, which are also aren't in optimal function. They're not functioning in a healthy way. So there's an inner predisposition. And if you improve that inner health, you'll improve your likelihood to overcome whatever's thrown at you in life. So that's the idea. To follow on from that, I'll go forward to the next bit. The interesting thing next is to look at what is health and what is disease. Now, I've made a YouTube clip on this, so by all means look at my website, go to the YouTube bit and have a little look at it. But I'm going to talk about it very briefly here, because in order to recognize health, you've got to know what health is. You've sort of got to think about what does it mean to be healthy. And it's not just a physical thing, it's all different levels. And then what is disease? So I've depicted it here as like a perfect circle that's all clear. Health means ease, function, and balance. Now, when you look at relationships within yourself, when you compare, say, your organs with other organs, or one joint with another joint, or maybe even your mind with your emotions, they're in sync, they're one, there's no difference. So if you look at relationships, they're functioning in harmony with one another. That's what health is. And the secret is you don't have to be an expert on disease. All you got to do is know that if you look at the relationships in yourself, you'll start determining where you're healthy already, where you're not healthy. And your job in treatment and healing and meditation is to bring them back into harmony with one another. And if you're in harmony, you're exactly where you're meant to be right now. Disease, on the other hand, means it's in the language. Disease means it's disease. It's not easy anymore. It's difficult. It's not functioning. It's dysfunctioning, and it's not balanced. It's imbalanced. So that's why I've sort of simplified it to a trinity of concepts. If you are not at ease, then if you do a meditation, for example, and your mind is going through your body, and you notice that you go through your head and it's really easy, and then you get to your chest and it's not easy anymore. A lot of people, when they start meditating, go, I can't do it. But they don't realize that they could do it in their head, for example. That means that you're actually, as you go for a walk through your body, you've just noticed what's healthy and you've come across the problem, you've found the edge of the problem, and it starts getting difficult. The fact that it is difficult, going on this definition, means something is going on. Now, the human being, we jump steps, we think, we suddenly react, we don't want to go there, it makes us feel uncomfortable, we start feeling uncomfortable, so we go, oh, this is not working for me, I'm not going to do it. Or you come across someone who's healthy, and the health in that person floods our system, makes us feel healthier, draws our problems up, we become aware of our problems, and we go, oh, I don't want to go away from you, you're making me feel uneasy. But the other person isn't making us feel uneasy. We're uneasy because it's drawing out our own inner imbalances. And talk about the ART. A is asymmetry, R is range and quality of movement imbalance, and T is tissue texture change. So something that isn't balanced will not be sitting right. It's asymmetrical, doesn't feel like it moves very well, and it doesn't feel very healthy. It has all of those three things. And that's really important because whether we're doing physical assessment or postural assessment, or mental or emotional or psychological assessment, it's exactly the same. You can have an emotional restriction just as much as you can have a physical one. And when you look at the relationships, that means that there is some parts of our system that are really good and other parts of our system that are out of sync. So when we do any of our meditations, we're going to find the healthiest part of our system, and we're going to find the most problematic part of our system. And we're going to see what happens when we do a little relationship counseling session between them. That's what we're going to do in our meditations until they sort out their differences and they come out healthy. This is just, I made this up from a joke with one of my clients once, and I got this image. There's a signpost, hell to the left, heaven to the right, and there's a guy that is walking down the road, and they come to the intersection, and they're just oblivious. They're walking around the corner, and this guy's praying, please show me the way. Don't let me go to hell. So don't let me get sick. Don't let me have problems. And then the message comes from the divine: if you don't want to go to hell, why are you heading that direction? So this sort of made me laugh, because we have a choice to choose health or disease, for example, and we have free will to choose that. But in this picture, why I'm showing it to you is because what is this person missing that they need in order to be able to make that choice? They're just obliviously, blindly going around the corner. There's no awareness. They're not tuning into their bodies. They're just spinning in their heads, and their mind is occupied with their belief, but they're not listening to what they actually need. And therefore, when they get to the turning point, they'll just guess the direction. And sometimes they'll guess the right way, and sometimes they'll guess the wrong way. But there really isn't much of a choice. You only really have choice if you're tuning in. This is what we need to use to create awareness. We use our mind and our consciousness like a detective magnifying glass to look inside. We have a mind, we need to learn how to use it, okay? But we can't do this if we're stuck in our heads, if we're stuck in our belief systems, or if we're stuck in faulty interpretations. And usually, most of the time, interpretation is based on what we think, not on what's actually there. So we need to learn to use our mind to see what's actually there, not what we think is there. So we can use it to tune in, which I call tapping into our intuition, or tune out. When we tune out, I call that wishful thinking. You're thinking outwardly, projecting your belief systems out into the world, and you're not checking to see if they're actually healthy belief systems by running it through your system. So our blind beliefs, our attachments, when we think, our thoughts are going out. When we're actually contemplating, we're bringing them back in, and we're feeling one with the thought. There's no going out, it's bringing it within. So that's what we're going to use. And this picture is just showing that if the mind is clear, we will touch things, feel through touch, taste, smell, see and hear with much more clarity, because there's no interference. This picture is, I'm not going to go through this now, this is another topic, but this is one of the perspectives we can use to notice health. But most people are stuck in the quicksand of their own issues. So if we turn our minds inward, this is depicting the location of a part of the body that's unhealthy, that's got problems. Might be physical or mental or emotional, or the physical manifestation of emotional or inner distress. So when a person is stuck in that stress, it means their consciousness is inside the problem. They're looking at life from their problem. And if they operate from that place, they're going to project that out into the world. So when we go to heal, we want to notice where the edges of the problem are, step out of it. So we can come back to this diagram on the right here. By stepping out, we can identify ourselves back with health. And it's like jumping out of the quicksand and then going and get a hose, turning it on with health, plugging it back in the quicksand and flushing the problem out. We we repair broken steps. If you're building a staircase, you don't repair the broken step from the broken step. You start on a healthy step and rebuild another healthy step, and then you step onto it. And that's what we're doing by contrasting what's healthy with what's not healthy. And that gets us off to the next step. And this is like creating like a healing triangle. This is what I've This comes from my module 4 on healing relationships that I've put out there on Teachable. So you can do a relationship exercise between two people, or you can do it between two parts of ourselves. It doesn't really matter. But I always put a little life source in there to represent 100% health. It represents the ideal. So we make a little triangle between the health, us, and whoever else we've got conflict with, whether it's a part of ourselves or another person. This picture on the left is depicting that when the consciousness is tuned into the problem, it can feed the problem. When we're healing, we're not doing that. We're noticing the problem, noticing the edges, surrounding it, and we're then letting the health come from within, out, and outside in, and start to transmute and work through the problem. So we can't heal problems by running away, by dwelling on them, or projecting them. We have to work through them until they clear and become health. The picture on the right here is actually showing when another person is projecting something onto us, their belief system. And let's say that belief system is not healthy, it's unhealthy. What this is showing us is that if they're projecting an unhealthy belief on us, this person's energy field is caving in. What that means is it's still our issue, because we're allowing that disease to make us more diseased. We're not owning our power. So what we would need to do then, it's our responsibility, because we're letting ourselves be affected by other people or the environment or things that are happening in the environment. So what we do is we go inside, we notice our health, we notice that we're caving our fields in, and we re-inflate them and heal. And then that's owning our power. That health will overflow back on the other person, which makes their negative projections cave back in on themselves. It puts them in an environment that makes that person responsible to heal their own crap. So I liken that to if you're in an office and the boss gives you some papers and work to do, but you palm it off to everybody else because you don't want to do it. Imagine if everybody in the office keeps putting when they get it projected onto them, keeps putting it back on the table. Every time you come back in the office, it's right there. And after a while, you get so sick and tired of palming it off to someone that you decide, I'm just going to deal with it. So you look at the project, you deal with it, and you get it done, and you go, wow, I actually achieved something. So that's called owning your power and not letting other people project. This is the last thing I really want to talk about, is what actually we're going to do in our practice. So, for example, I think we're nearly running out of time, but I'll talk about this more in the practice. But basically, this is a person with a conflict. You separate the conflict from the health, right? And then you sort of do a relationship counseling. So imagine the health as a person, conflict as a person, and you are putting them in the same room and helping them to get along. Now, what you're doing in the healing phase is the health is going to flow health. I've just written an article on this, so if you want a bit more detail, I would suggest look at the article. And disease is going to react. So this is where I talk about reaction versus response. So two people in the room, health projecting health, disease wants to ignore it. So what it does initially is it reacts to that health. It doesn't like being confronted with its own issues, so it tries to react. Once it realizes, so it might argue, it might yell, it might scream, it might try to beat the health up, it might try to ignore it. Health just stays healthy, it doesn't buy into it. Its problem eventually realizes that it's been difficult, that it's the one causing the problem, and it stops and it relaxes, it runs out of steam and goes, you're not so bad for me, and it goes to neutral. And that neutral point means that you're at a balance between health and disease. They're actually listening and talking to one another. No communication can resolve unless both people are aware of one another and communicate. Then what happens is you get a response phase. That person's now willing to listen to health, but they don't get it yet. They're sort of learning how to play the piano. They start to wrestle with the information, they start to change, and you feel the body reorganizing. And once it's reorganizing, it's like learning to master a skill. It gets to the point where it gets to the point where it goes, oh, okay, I've got it, thanks, let's go. And you get a nice balance and rhythm of life, which means that this person is now balanced. There is one. There's no conflict anymore. There's no disease anymore. There's just health. And this is just the little take-home message. This is feed the flower of health, starve the weed of disease. We need to be aware of our health, clear the disease, but don't dwell on it, don't project it, don't run away from it. And that'll lift our immunity, help us be responsible for our own part in the picture of what's created in the world, clear our issues and overflow with health and create a healthier world.